Hello, friends. Hello. This is TAMI Lynn Chambers, TLC for the Soul. We've been reading from Moxie and Roses. This is the next chapters, starting with chapter 12, Love Bugs. As she walked towards the house, Amber could feel someone come up behind her. She was so intent on getting there to speak to her mother that she didn't feel him come into step with her. But he was there just the same, and she turned to look at him.
"It's okay, little one. We can do this," Edgar said,
holding out his hand to take hers.
"We both have a lot to say to that lovely woman inside, but I know that we will both feel better when we get this out in the open. What do you say to that? Can we all just be one big happy family?"
Amber wasn't quite sure what one big happy family was, as she had been used to having just her and her mom in her life, and that wasn't always easy. She wanted to know her father better, but he had been the one to remove himself from her life, not her. So she had been content to just be there at the ranch with her mother. But she wanted a father in her life, and she wanted a happy family. So she was hoping, really hoping in her heart, that this was what Edgar meant. And then maybe, just maybe, she would be able to call him Papa and not feel bad about it. Edgar knew that he was going to propose to Pamela even before the box showed him its treasure. How had he been so foolish for so long, thinking that he could avoid his feelings? He didn't want to admit the pain that Amelia had left in his heart. A pain so intense it had lingered there all these years. But the box had opened it all up again, just like a fresh wound on the day it was made. He felt her heart in his hands, and he felt her body as the soul within it left its earthly bounds. Oh, how he had loved the raven-haired beauty who was 2 years his senior. He had met her at a wilderness camp, something his grandmother had insisted that he attend.
"You won't learn the old ways of our elders just sitting around all day at home," she had told the then 16-year-old Edgar. "You've got to get out there and practice some of the things your elders have taught you over the years. You've got to get out there and make some friends, too," she said, holding out an old leather medicine bag to him. "It's time that you own this now," she said. "Your grandfather wanted you to have it, and he would have given it to himself had he not up and died the way he did," she said with a tear in her eye. "So go now and fill it with what makes you feel good. All the medicine that you've been taught and been given over the years," she said forlornly now. So he left her to her daydreams of times past, and proceeded to gather all the things that meant medicine to him. There was the eagle feather of his grandfather's, the bear claw, and the hoof of a small sheep. There was the crystal he had dug out of the ground when he was just a toddler, and the heart medicine of the weeping willow tree branch. All these things he packed in his bag and readied himself for camp. What he didn't realize is that the biggest medicine of all would not fit in this small leather pouch. It was coming from another heart which much greater love to share than he could imagine, and that he could ever deem possible at such a young age. He had met Amelia the first night at camp around the fire. She had sat down next to him, and pulling her raven-colored hair into a tight bun, she had proceeded to share with the circle a story about how she had found love inside a conch shell at the beach one day. Her description of hearing her creator speak to her inside the shell was so spectacular that she didn't know how to explain it in words. So she had acted it out in a pantomime dance, and that was when he fell for her. For in the telling of the story, her gestures, and the heartfelt emotion in her face, he could feel the love she was sending out, and it seemed like it was meant just for him, although that was not her original intent. He watched her as she danced and moved and told the story through her eyes, and Edgar thought that at that moment he couldn't be any more in love with anything else in the whole world. He motioned her towards him as she moved in the dance, and she came and settled back down next to him.
The circle clapped and moved around her to embrace her. She was full of joy as the energy of the storytelling shifted and gathered around everyone in the circle.
My name is Edgar, he had said,
holding out his hand to shake hers. At 16, and this being his first love, he hadn't had any other training in how to make love to a woman yet. He needed to feel her next to him was the only thing that was going through his brain. And in her wanting to also feel the kind of love that moves mountains, she had extended her small hand and let his envelop around it. She felt the energy of love, and a spark so familiar and yet so foreign to her. They spent the rest of camp together, and it seemed that nothing but the most rudimentary of things could separate them from each other. When camp ended, Edgar vowed to come see her at her parents' home in Montana. It was a short ride, he lied to himself, from his homeland in Oklahoma. He would most definitely find a way there. And then they had separated at camp's end, and he had vowed to see her again no matter what. He ended up hitching a ride from the camp up to her hometown, and there he got a job as a horse trainer. All thoughts of finishing school had been erased from his mind, and it was there that he courted her and spent all his time trying to get her to take him into her arms. When the last of summer was passing, she decided that they were to be together, and they consummated their love under an early autumn moon. Not long after, Amelia started feeling funny. The kind of feeling you know when something is wrong, but you can't quite place your finger on it. Edgar, deeply in love with her now, encouraged her to tell her parents. They reacted by scheduling all manner of doctor visits. There were endless tests and appointments, and the end result was something all of them could not fathom. She would be with them through the autumn at best, but she was quickly being taken over by a disease that would end her young life. The doctors still weren't sure exactly what it was, but it took her over and corrupted her body. Her spirit, still strong, longed to be with Edgar, but her parents insisted she stay at the hospice home they had chosen for her. Edgar would sneak in and spend the night with her, holding her small, frail body against his strong, muscular one, holding her through her pain and tears as they made love under the thick blankets. She wanted all of him desperately, and yet she knew that the end was close, so close that she could feel death's long arms reaching out for her. When the first days of winter were upon the land, and Montana was covered in huge blankets of snow, Edgar had taken her out on the land at her request. She couldn't take the hospice any longer. The smell of sickness and dying made her so sad. And under the pine tree forest in her favorite place, he had held her close to him as she had taken her final breaths, her soul longing to be free of a body that had decided to give out on her at such a young age. And he had longed for her, howled and cried over her stiff form, not wanting to take her back to her home. And he vowed that from that moment forward, he would never let another woman into his heart again. Pausing on the back porch, Edgar was drawn out of his reverie by Amber. She had gone inside and left him sitting on the rockers, and he had almost fallen asleep. They hadn't been sure if Pamela was still awake, so Amber had gone inside first to check. And Amber had found her up in her room in front of the mirror, not admiring herself as she usually did, but dreaming about how it would be to feel love again. And in her dreaming, Amber had walked up behind her. Seeing her daughter's reflection in the mirror, Pamela turned around to face her. "What is it, dear? Are you okay?" she said softly to Amber. And at those sweet words, Amber dropped to her knees and laid her head upon her mother's lap. "Oh, Mom, I've been so foolish and hurtful. I love you so much, and I just wanted to tell you so," she said, looking up into her mother's eyes. Pamela's eyes misted over as she reached down to touch her daughter's gold-spun hair. "Oh, hon, I love you too, dear. There's no reason to cry now. Are you okay?" I'm fine, Mom. It's just that drum circle did something to me. I see everything now in a new and different light. I just want you to know that I love you, Mom, and I hope you can forgive me for being the way I have for a while now," she said more strongly now.
I'm not mad at you, Mom, although I think it's come across that way, and I think I'm mad at Dad and the situation he left you in. Can you please forgive me?
There. She had said everything in her heart, and she hoped that her mother would really hear her heartfelt words and not just pretend to hear them as in times past. Pamela never imagined that she would hear these words from her daughter, but her heart leapt at them. She didn't want to fight with Amber all the time. She wanted her daughter to be her friend, and she wanted them to get along and do mother-daughter things together.
Mom, one more thing before I forget to say it, Amber said, summoning up the strength to keep going. I like Luke. I mean, really like him, Mom. I want you to support that. Will you?
Luke was the first thing that popped into Pamela's mind, but what came out was something she hadn't expected to hear. She was used to judging everyone she came into contact with, but something in the drum circle had changed her too, and she realized that really all people were just the same, regardless of their ethnicity or social status. She liked Luke as a person, and he was a good ranch hand. Was he good enough for her daughter? She wasn't sure about that yet, but she decided to give him a chance. Okay, hon, I'm okay with that. I want to get to know him better. Does he feel the same about you, dear? Pamela wasn't sure she wanted to know. Thinking about the Magnum condom again, she realized that Amber needed some sex education and fast. Let's talk more about this in the morning. We'll invite Luke up for breakfast, and we can all get to know one another better. There, that was the best she could do at the moment, and only time would tell.
Thanks, Mom, Amber said with hope in her voice. I know you're going to love him.
Amber was so happy she had not felt this good in a long time. She knew this was the key to being happy with her mother. She just needed to be more honest and open in her feelings, and they both could get along. She rose up and decided it was time for Edgar's turn.
Mom, there's someone else who wants to see you. He's waiting downstairs on the porch, Amber said as Pamela's curiosity gained.
Is it Edgar? Pamela said, rising from her chair.
I'm not going to say.
Amber was so happy for her mother, but she didn't want to spoil his surprise.
You'll need to go down and find out for yourself, Amber said
as she started out of the room. Pamela started, and then stopped for a moment to look at herself in the mirror. She smoothed her hair and added a small dab of perfume behind each ear. Then she headed downstairs towards the back door. Never mind that it was way past her bedtime. She just had a feeling, and it was a good one. Pamela slowly opened the back door leading to the porch. She saw him sitting on the rocker with his eyes closed, and at that moment she felt a love so strong move through her body. She knew he loved her too. He just had to. She thought he might be asleep, but at the sound of the back door he opened his eyes.
Well, here we are, he said somewhat sleepily. Come here, beautiful. I have something I want to discuss with you, Edgar said, patting the rocker next to him. Pamela's knees were wobbly as she walked over towards the rocker. She sat down timidly, almost afraid to hear what he had to say. What if he wanted to leave the ranch? What if he wanted to leave her and never come back again? You're thinking too much, he said, staring at her in the darkness,
with only the porch light and the stars illuminating them. I know. I always do that when I'm nervous, she said, trailing off.
Shh now. I have something to tell you, he said. I don't want you to pay attention because I may only have the courage to say it once, he said.
Edgar couldn't believe he was saying these words out loud, but he knew they were the right thing to say, and this was the right time to say them.
Miss Pamela Cartwright, I want you to know something, he said, as he removed his hat and knelt down on one knee in front of her. You are the lady in my life, and you always have been. You are my shining star, and you always will be.
Pamela was crying now, and big shiny tears streamed down her face and landed on her lap.
Miss Pamela, I know what I want now in my life. I guess I've always known it, he said,
shifting his position to get closer to her.
I better hurry this up or these old knees are going to give out, he said, laughing lightly. Miss Pamela, would you do me the honor of being my wife? I think I'm madly in love with you.
There he had said it, all of it that he had wanted to say for so long. The words weren't many, but Pamela knew that they carried within them all of his heart, and at the sound of them a longing welled up from within her.
You don't know how long I've waited for you to speak to me like that, she said as she reached forward to caress his face. You don't know how much this means to me, she said, sobbing with delight now.
Oh, that's enough of this, Edgar said, and with a flourish he stood up and swept her off her feet, twirling her around several times. When he set her down, he looked longingly into her eyes. All the years passed between them, from the time they first met to all the ones in between, and everything that had brought them to this moment. He reached out to caress her cheek and slowly brought his lips onto hers. The kiss was long and slow, and it reached back into timelessness. His hands moved over her body, and she succumbed to his caresses with soft moans of her own longing. How long, she thought, had she waited for this moment, and now here it was, a reality at last. And they danced in the moonlight, swaying back and forth under the spell of the kiss. Edgar broke free of it and looked at her with great seriousness. Does this mean you'll say yes? He asked, as if afraid that perhaps she would refuse him now.
Oh, lover, it's most definitely a yes and more, she said, as she reached for him and pulled him to her again. Chapter 13. The Screech Returns. Locked in this passionate embrace, Edgar and Pamela were scarcely aware of anything around them. They knew that nothing could keep them apart now, but they were also making up for lost time.
Come with me to my tent, Edgar said, whispering into Pamela's ear.
But before they could escape and begin their love-making, something eerie and wicked sounded rising up from out of the woods. The screech, long and loud and wailing, pierced the night air, and they both jumped at the sound of it. They broke apart and made off together towards the stables, knowing the horses would definitely be upset by this.
I've got to get to the bottom of this, Edgar thought to himself as he got to the stable door before Pamela and rushed inside to find the horses in a frenzy. How many times have you heard that sound? Edgar asked, taking the most skittish horses and moving them together into the main paddock area.
We've heard it several times over the past few weeks. It's why I called you here urgently, Pamela said, breathing heavily from running and fear. It terrifies me, she said, with eyes wide, looking at him.
You know what, he said, we are going to figure this out. I have an idea of what's going on, but I don't want to say anything about it until I confirm its validity, he said, coaxing the horses into calm submission with small whistles and clicking sounds. Just then the barn door opened and Diego stepped in, looking sleepy and confused. Did y'all hear it? He said, still trying to shake the sleep from himself. We tried last night to follow it into the woods, but we didn't find anything out there other than the box, he said to them, as he moved around, trying to help Edgar coax the horses into a calm state. He didn't want to let on that he'd actually tried to wander into the woods after dinner to search it out further. He had gotten about half a mile into the grove and past the first clearing, and then he had started to feel an otherworldly fear step in. The hair on the back of his neck standing up, and his breathing quickening as he realized that the next group of trees before him appeared very dark and foreboding. What is in there, he thought to himself, as he almost pushed himself to keep moving. He hadn't told anyone he was coming out there, and Moxie had been fast asleep when he had left her side, tiptoeing from the gatehouse bedroom where Pamela had agreed that she could stay in exchange for doing small chores around the ranch for the next few weeks. He could feel something that bade him to move further into the wood. Keep going, he told himself. What could possibly be in there? It's just some animal, he said over and over again, putting one foot in front of the other. Diego got as close as the opening to the thick pine trees, and then the screech sounded, and the intensity of it almost knocked him off his feet. Holy crap, his mind raced now. Keep going. His feet kept moving forward. He saw something from within the thick covering of pine and pinyon trees. I've got to see what that is, he thought. There was a dim glow coming from the base of one tree. Someone must be living out here, he thought again, almost relieved. Well, that would explain a lot, he thought, as he moved in closer. Hello, is anyone out here? I'm from Thunder Rose Ranch. I come in peace, he said, somewhat comically, but really wanting it to be clear that he didn't mean harm in case some crazy drifter with a gun decided to open fire on him. But this was no crazy human. No, this was something more sinister and dangerous. This was something that, if provoked, could overtake a man's spirit and cause him to go slowly insane.
a consciousness that didn't appreciate being bothered. It was busy, and it didn't want some human encroaching on its work. It summoned the energy to appear in whatever he wanted to see, and so he saw what he wanted to see. The figure of a disheveled human appeared before Diego, and it arranged its energy in order to communicate with him, and he heard what he wanted to hear. "Oh, hey, sorry about that," it said, forming itself into words and a vision of a poor lost soul. It wanted him to leave, and it wanted it now. I didn't realize I was on someone's property. I just need to camp here tonight, and then I'll move on. Is that okay?" It said, appearing forlorn and needy now, knowing that he was a sucker for a guy down on his luck. "Oh, hi," Diego said, with relief flooding his body. See, this was no evil spirit, he told his mind, which saw a poor soul who just needed a break. "Hey, sure, no rush. Stay the night. But you should be careful out here. I need to let my boss know you're here. I would move on tomorrow morning, though, because folks around these parts are pretty scared right now about what might be out here," he said, with compassion for the stranger. "Take it easy," he said, pulling back and starting to turn towards leaving and going back to the ranch. His mind didn't want to admit that this person couldn't possibly have made that noise. He just wanted to believe all was fine so he could get back to his soft bed. So he turned and moved one foot in front of the other, glad that he could tell everyone at the ranch that he had located the source of the disturbances in the woods. And as he walked away, the thing in the form of the lonely stranger morphed back into its original shape. Something so wicked it defied description. It wanted so badly to call out to the others in its loud, wailing scream, but it didn't want to unnerve the human, so it waited. Working together with the horses, they were able to get them subdued and ready to go back into their stalls. This was the worst time ever in terms of the screech and its loud wailing, and it was evident that they couldn't go on hearing this sound and having everyone at the ranch on pins and needles. "We really need to get to the bottom of this," Edgar said out loud, thinking that he could somehow get them to realize that things wouldn't change until they all committed to working together. "I think we need to band together somehow, but I haven't figured out exactly what we need to be doing yet." He was pensive as he stroked Ebony's mane and breathed deeply of the smell of hay and horse manure. "I could use some strong coffee to get my brain fired up," he said. "Any chance that I could talk you into brewing us up some?" he said, looking at Pamela lovingly. He knew that Marguerite technically owned the kitchen, but he'd tried Pamela's coffee before, and it was some of the best he'd ever had. "Sure, love," she said, winking at him. "But you owe me," she said as she turned and sashayed out of the barn. She was disappointed that they hadn't made love, but that only made her longing for him stronger. "I'll get you into my bed come hell or high water," she chuckled to herself as she imagined them beneath the covers together. Diego and Edgar finished up with the horses, ensuring each one was bedded down safely in their respective stalls. Then they went outside for some fresh air. The night sky was still beaming with stars as the soft hush of twilight began to appear on the horizon. "What are we going to do?" Diego asked. "These girls can't stay out here by themselves with this situation going on. They won't be able to come running every time the horses get upset, and folks around here have surely been hearing this sound too and are becoming curious. What do you think, Edgar?" he asked expectantly. "Well, I think we need to get our act together and figure this out, but it's not as easy as you think," Edgar said. "While good is on our side, we still have some very evil forces to reckon with. Heck, I don't even know why they are targeting this ranch, yet alone what they plan to do now. I only know that we are all here to help in our own unique way. Something has brought us together as a team and wants us to help. I have a feeling that the answers to a lot of these questions will be revealed to us over the coming week. We just need to be patient and wait for the path to become clear. All is well for now," he said, patting Diego on the back and making his way towards the main house and a cup of warm coffee. Diego, on the other hand, wasn't so confident, and his mind went back to the lone stranger in the woods as a small shiver ran down his spine. Moxie sat up in bed and turned on the bedside lamp. The screech had pulled her out of a deep sleep, and she wondered where Diego had gone. She looked outside and saw a soft light coming from the barn and realized he must have gone there to work with the horses. She wanted to get up and follow after him, but the bed was so cozy and warm, and it was a long time since she had been so comfortable and able to go to sleep so easily. It was hard to wind down from nights at the club, and she often had to take a sleeping pill in order to relax. She didn't want to be dependent on anything, yet she knew that she couldn't take this club thing much longer. She wanted a different life, and she felt deep down inside that this situation at the ranch was driving her towards big changes. She wasn't sure about all the spooky stuff, and her being some sort of messenger to the divine, but she was sure that she loved the outdoors and the horses, and if anything, there was a future here with Pamela and the horse training business. So she set her mind to find out more about what went on at the ranch, and then she slithered back down under the warm comforter. She made soft cooing sounds under her breath, soothing herself to sleep the way her grandmother did when she was small. She slowly drifted into a slumber and dreamt about a dark creature out in the woods, holding Diego by the throat. Chapter 14, A New Day. Morning broke over the ranch, and the sun pulled itself up from its slumber and dressed the sky in pinks and yellows. Diego stirred in his sleeping bag and got up slowly. He had decided to spend the night in the barn with the horses just in case. He couldn't shake the previous night from his mind, and the vision of the wayward soul in the wood came back to him again. Certainly this guy would be gone by now, but he decided to hike out there after breakfast just to double-check. Pamela wouldn't be happy about drifters in her woods, as she liked to call them. They are so disrespectful of our property, she would always say whenever Luke or Billy would tell her they had found someone camping there. Marguerite had arrived before sunrise to start breakfast, knowing she had a house full of hungry people to feed. She loved taking care of everyone, and if it wasn't for the spooky happenings, she would have moved into the guest cottage that was reserved for hired hands. She wouldn't allow herself to be comfortable in the house until the strange happenings had been circumvented, and then maybe she would consider it. But for now, she poured love into homemade biscuits and vegan cream gravy, marmalade jam, espresso, and eggs and bacon for the boys. Amber was the first one down, and she pulled an earthen mug from the cupboard and poured a cup of strong coffee, adding a dollop of coconut cream and sugar to it. She blew into the cup, and the warm steam cleared her head, and she was sure that she knew exactly what her day was going to be like. Her mind opened, and her head felt funny, almost dizzy, but not quite. She felt a sense of knowing, and she received a download of information that made her feel funny inside. What is happening to me, she thought as she drank in a large sip of the creamy brew. What she didn't know was that the drum journey had orchestrated an opening within her heart and mind. She had activated something that didn't want to be stopped now, and there was an awakening in her that she didn't currently realize. All would be revealed soon. As it was, she somehow felt more beautiful and radiant, and everyone around her looked like they were filled with light. She decided to take a long walk on the ranch in the outer pastures and just soak up the sun. Her day would be peaceful and beautiful, she thought to herself, as she took her coffee upstairs so she could change for her outing. Pamela woke up and reached across the bed, forgetting that Edgar hadn't really been there with her last night. Tonight, she thought. Tonight or else. She fingered her lace nightgown, deciding that she would dress to entice today, and that he simply wouldn't be able to resist her another moment, no matter what was going on around them. Lace garters and stockings were underneath a suede miniskirt and denim top, open to the cleavage beneath. A Southern girl doesn't show off all her charm at once, she thought twice, and buttoned one up on the blouse, and then smoothed her silky blonde hair with the straightening iron, opting for the sleek, sexy look. A pout of pink lip gloss and a dab of her new perfume in just the right places, and she was ready. Sauntering downstairs, she was pretty proud of herself as she passed the full-length mirror in the hall. "Take that, Edgar Whitetail," she said out loud. Edgar was already up long before sunrise, as he usually was, and had gone out to run along the forest edge. He needed his morning routine in order to ground and center himself for the day ahead. He had run several miles and then hiked up the big rock that was on the back 40 of the ranch. He used his tracking skills to follow the scent of the deer and found a small clutch of them in the thicket behind the woods. He had seen the tracks of a mountain lion and made a mental note to leave a peace offering out for her that night. He was on his way back to his campsite when he saw something up in the trees. What could that be, he thought to himself as he shaded his eyes to try to see more into the upper branches. Just then a large hoot owl flew out of the tree and just over his head. "Hello, sister," he said to the large owl, who didn't seem the least bit concerned with him at the moment. But for Edgar she was a sign and a portent that he knew that he must fully trust all his senses if he was going to stay in tune with what was really going on here. "Trust yourself and trust your guides completely," he told himself as he kept walking back towards the camp. The smell of bacon and coffee greeted his nose as he neared the house and ran into Diego coming out of one of the tents. "Good morning, boy. How you feeling today after all that hoopla last night?" Edgar asked him. "Pretty good, although something is still bothering me," Diego said, still confused about his encounter with the drifter. "Well, come sit down for a minute and let's see if we can dig into it a little," Edgar said, motioning Diego to take a seat around the fire pit. Diego sat, and Edgar placed himself across the fire pit so he could study the younger man's body language. "It seems to me that you're pretty upset by whatever this is that you saw. Why don't you tell me what happened?" Edgar said, clearly intrigued now. Diego shared the encounter, and as he spoke, a calm fell over him. He was glad to get this off his chest, as he realized he had really been worrying about it much more than he realized. "I don't know," he said. It all seemed normal, but I just still have this funny feeling about the whole ordeal, like there was more to it than meets the eye. It's hard to explain." But Edgar didn't need any further explanation in order to know exactly what was happening here. "You've been shined, boy." "Shined," came out of his mouth almost immediately. "Shined? What the heck is that?" Diego said expectantly. "It's when you've been led to believe something that it just isn't true. You've been fooled into thinking that something is not really what that something is. But what it really is the true question. I wouldn't be surprised if those crazy sounds in the woods are up to something. Tell me what this person looked like. I mean, close your eyes and try to picture what it really might have been," Edgar said, wanting Diego to go inside himself and trust his intuition. "I told you, it was a drifter," Diego said, uneducated in the ways of using his inner sight to help him. "Trust yourself and just close your eyes," Edgar said, directing him now. This boy clearly needed some mentoring, he thought. He has no idea of the ways of his people. Edgar knew that Diego came from a rich line of native seers, and that if he could just wake up to their energy, then his ancestors could help him to see better. Not see in the literal sense using his physical eyes, but to see with his inner eye and knowing. Diego closed his eyes. "Now take a few deep breaths and just stay there with your eyes closed," Edgar directed. "Focus on something, like the sound of the mower in the background, or the buzz of the air conditioner coming from outside the main house." He could sense that Diego was starting to relax now. "I'm going to let you relax for a minute. Just keep breathing. Focus on that sound," Edgar said, relaxing into it himself. Diego breathed easily and used the air conditioner hum to focus on. He could feel himself getting lighter, and his thoughts began to slow down. "Now clear your mind as best you can while still focusing on that sound," Edgar said quietly. Diego did as the older man suggested, and he could sense his mind beginning to clear. The sound of the air conditioner in the background keeping time with his breathing now. "Now that your mind is clear, bring your focus back to that night," Edgar said, trying to go there with Diego in his mind. "Go back to how you came upon the campsite. Try to recall everything you saw, heard, and felt and sensed as you came upon the camp," Edgar said, speaking slowly and breathing deeply. "What do you see?" Diego's breathing was rhythmic and relaxed. He could feel himself being taken to the other night. He could sense himself walking through the woods looking for anything that might lend a clue. "I see the woods, and there's this light coming from up ahead. It's a soft glow from just past the pines." He spoke slowly, trying to recall in his mind's eye the details as he saw them. "And what do you sense is up ahead?" Edgar said, waiting patiently. It's almost as if something is drawing me closer to it. Like like I have to go see what this light is all about," Diego said, his breathing picking up a little. "Stay calm," Edgar directed. "Try to keep your emotions out of it. Just breathe and recall. See and feel," he said, taking a deep breath. "I'm walking closer to it now, and I break through the pine trees to the clearing, and I see something now," he said.
"And what does it feel like?" Edgar asked.
"It feels like I need to see whatever it is, and I need to speak to it," he said expectantly, as in his mind he walked closer to the figure. "But something isn't right. It just feels weird here," he said, as he saw himself moving into the camp of whatever it was.
"What doesn't feel right?" Edgar said,
keeping calm and continuing to breathe. "It just seems so out of place. I think this to myself as I walk up to it. And then I see that it's nothing to be concerned about. It's just some guy camping out here for the night," Diego said, recalling the finer details of the encounter.
"And what did you speak about?" Edgar asked.
"Just about the camp and how we needed to get out in the morning because Miss Pamela wouldn't be happy about a drifter staying in her woods."
"And what did this person do then?" Edgar waited.
He just seemed content with whatever I said, but it didn't really feel that way at all," Diego continued.
"How did it feel to you? Really feel deeply into this now, Diego. How did it really feel to you?"
Diego breathed in sharply before letting out,
"It felt like pure evil." "Keep breathing. Start to come back to where we're at here," Edgar said, not letting on just how concerned he really was now. "Just breathe normally. Start to focus on my voice. You can open your eyes when you're ready," he said, standing up.
Diego slowly came back to the area around him and opened his eyes. "Wow, that was amazing," he said, standing up slowly. "I've never done anything like that before." He smiled from ear to ear. "What did I say?" Edgar, not wanting to scare the boy, but wanting him to be sure that he was okay now, simply said,
I think we need to explore this further. We've got lots of things to teach you, but for now, we have work to do, and we need to get on with it as soon as possible. We'll start after breakfast."
"But what did I say?" Diego asked again. "Who was that guy I saw out there?"
"It may just be our worst nightmare come to life," was all Edgar said as he started walking towards the main house. "But never you mind for now. We need all our strength to fight this thing. Let's go eat, and then I'll share more with you," Edgar said as he moved closer to the bacon and coffee smells and into the main house.
Entering into the house, he was met by all the things he loved about Marguerite. Her cooking never stopped amazing him, and his stomach growled in anticipation of the meal. From atop the staircase, he could sense that Pamela was making her grand entrance, and true to her way of doing so, she emerged just in time to catch his eye.
"Well, hello there, darling," he said, moving over to her and planting a passionate kiss deeply on her lips. The curve of her body in his hands made him want her all the more, and he made a note of the cleavage as he smiled, thinking about how they might be together soon. He realized he'd been waiting for this moment for quite some time now, maybe even from the first time that they met so many years ago. He had been so afraid to admit to himself that he chastised himself a little bit and vowed not to keep himself from things he loved any longer. This applied on so many levels that he truly didn't realize the healing he was receiving just from being at the ranch. But all would soon be revealed, and his mind closed on the topic of love and lust and moved to breakfast. "I'm starving. Where's everyone?" he said, noticing no one else was around yet. "I saw Diego on the way in."
"Amber's usually down a little later," Pamela said. "She always comes down for her morning drink, but spends time on herself up in her room before she comes down for breakfast," Pamela said, knowing that the ways of women's morning routines were often lost on men. "Let's eat before it gets cold," she said, lifting lids off chafing dishes. "Marguerite, you've outdone yourself today," Pamela said, knowing the woman was lingering around close by in case someone needed something. "Oh, thank you, Miss Pamela," Marguerite said, coming from the pantry with fresh bread in her hands. "I made this last night. It should make a wonderful sandwich for lunch later."
How could we possibly eat lunch after this amazing spread? Edgar said, winking at her.
She blushed slightly as she passed him, not missing the smell of his aftershave and secretly wondering if he really might like her just a little.
Poor Marguerite, Edgar thought to himself. He could tell she was a little lonely and that this family was like her own. He wondered about her story and made a mental note to sit down with her one day and get to know her better. After all, he might just be the man of the house soon, he thought, as this knowing suddenly came into his mind, and he quickly brushed it aside. Don't get ahead of yourself, buddy, he thought. Don't kill it before it barely gets going, he thought, knowing his propensity to scare good women away. It had happened before with Glenda, and he didn't want anything like that to happen to him and Pamela. This relationship was too special for him. Glenda had been waitressing at the local cafe in Oklahoma City, and he had taken to her the first time she had waited on him. He had been there with some of the vaqueros and ranch hands from the ranch where he was working at for the summer, and Glenda had been a welcome sight after weeks of hanging out with male testosterone and bulls. She smelled of sweet cotton candy and had on a short dress that all the waitresses were wearing. But her curves filled out the dress in ways that appealed to him, and he had struck up a conversation that lasted longer than the meal. They had exchanged information, but since he didn't have a phone, he could only promise to come back by the next time he was in town. But Glenda couldn't wait that long and had shown up at the ranch on the Friday before he was heading out on a long cattle drive. She knew the ways of the cattlemen and had hoped she was getting his attention. He was going to be gone for a while, and she knew what a lonely time that could be for a man. Glenda needed someone in her life, and she wanted that someone to be Edgar, if only for a little while. His native looks and muscular form drew her to him like a fly to honey, and she wanted more of what she had seen at the cafe. Edgar had decided to give her a chance, since she was so pleasing to him, too. Heck, this might be the start of something pretty good, he had thought, when she suggested they spend the afternoon together. He had put on his best denim and let his hair flow down past his shoulders, as was the way when courting a woman. At least in his lineage, this was how courting had been explained to him. Glenda had made a picnic lunch, and they had spent the afternoon down by the river eating and talking about their lives, when Glenda unexpectedly reached out and caressed his cheek. Being the man he was, Edgar knew a come-on when he felt it. He reached out and pulled her into his arms, taking her down into the warm blanket. The sun and the river, the only ones witnessing their passionate lovemaking as they came together under the cloudy afternoon sky. Edgar was blissful, but for some reason, Glenda wasn't so sure. As he looked lovingly into her eyes, he opened up and shared that he could get used to having her around like this. Glenda suddenly got cold feet and decided she didn't want to be held onto by anyone. She had up and bolted, taken the picnic basket and blanket, and was gone from his life almost as swiftly as she had entered it. From that day, Edgar had vowed that just like his ponies, women were only meant to hold on to until it was time to let them go. Some sooner than others. His heart broke a little more that day, and he closed himself off even further from any hurt that love might bring him. But the past few days with Pamela had opened his eyes and his heart, and he knew that this truly was a new day in more ways than one. And that is where we will end this. And the next time I see you back will be the final chapters of Moxie and Roses. Take care, everyone.